Hi everyone, this is Paul here from the Magdalene Centre. Today I'm going to be talking about Chiron retrograde, which starts on the 30th of June and continues through to the 4th of December, and it takes place in the sign of Pisces. Chiron has been in Pisces since 2011, but next year Chiron will be moving signs again into Aries. So this is the last retrograde of the Pisces phase of Chiron's transit. So this is a time to reflect on the wounds that are of a Piscean nature. So, before going further, for anyone who's not familiar with Chiron, Chiron is known as the wounded healer, and astronomically, Chiron is a comet which orbits between the orbits of Uranus and Saturn. So, he's like a bridge between Saturn, which marks the outer limits of ordinary mundane consciousness, and Uranus, which, as the sun, awakens us to the realms of the soul. And Chiron is the bridge between these two levels of experience. He was discovered in 1977 and spends about 51 years travelling around the sun. So we're still in Chiron's maiden voyage in terms of our discovery of him. So at the moment we're experiencing Chiron more intense than how we'll likely experience him once he returns back to his point of discovery and moves into his second orbit around the sun. So with Chiron, in mythology, he was a centaur, and so half man, half horse, and during a battle he was wounded in the animal part of his nature by a stray arrow that was laced with poison, and whilst Chiron was immortal, he could not heal this particular wound because of the nature of the poison in it. And this myth symbolises what chirotic wounds are like. So these are wounds in our psyche which we can't just ignore, we can't just push aside or just accept it. They're the wounds that change us, but how that change occurs depends entirely on us. So with Chiron in Pisces, these are the wounds that stem from disconnection, and during the retrograde phase, Chiron asks us to look at the wounds that occurred when Chiron was direct, and look at what discomfort is starting to rise within us, what are we trying to avoid, where we may be feeling anxiety, because all these wounds in Pisces are related to the feeling of being disconnected from source, from universal love, and therefore all the actions that we take to try and compensate for that, whether that be through escapism, addiction, could be hard substances. Sometimes it's escapism through seemingly noble means like workaholism, where we're not the underlying motive behind all that working is not necessarily to be virtuous, it's to avoid ourselves, it's to avoid facing our internal nature and our pain. So the work is a defence mechanism, it's not a conscious act of service to help other people. There's an underlying escapist motivation for it. So during this transit of Chiron retrograde, we need to look at where do we feel separated from source, what parts of us have been disconnected from our greater holistic self for a while and needs to be reintegrated. Because as painful as the healing process can be with Chiron, whenever we consciously embrace the process and make an effort to reconcile the wounded part, we achieve a greater depth of healing than we've ever reached before, because a new part of us that hasn't been reconciled with our sense of identity, our sense of who we are, becomes reunited with the whole and becomes healed through unconditional love and unconditional self-acceptance. So during this time, it's important that if we find ourselves engaging in escapism behaviour, it could be that suddenly we're scoffing far more sweet stuff in an effort to numb our emotions. Maybe it's time to slow down and invite that discomfort in, sit with it, and find out what is that discomfort trying to tell us. What part of us have we been disconnected from for a while and need to reconnect with, And where do we engage in shadow behaviours to try and control situations? Because the shadow side of Pisces is like a love of power, and whilst Pisces may be pure spirit, any action that we take that's motivated by a love of power will highlight our shadow sides, the parts of us that we haven't integrated because we've rejected them for whatever reason. Just because we reject them doesn't mean they go away. They're still within us, and unless we face them and transform them through love, they continue to hijack our most noble goals. But when we do face these issues, we acknowledge them consciously, and rather than filling ourselves with guilt, shame, self-judgment, self-criticism, we take a breath and accept that part of us with love, as painful as that may be to do. Then we can transform that love of power to the power of love. We can fill ourselves with universal love, divine love, call it what you will. But the trick with Chiron is either you can remain in a state of victim consciousness and say, woe is me, I'm wounded, or we can turn inwards, we can go into the wound and seek out the higher wisdom within it. Because if you remember from the myth, Chiron was shot in his animal self, so that for us that would be our ego self. So to turn Chiron to its greater good, we have to rise above the ego and operate from our soul instead. Because when we operate from our soul, then we can look to heal the wound, because we're not defining ourselves by this wound of separation, this wound of disconnection. We know ourselves to be greater than that, and we know ourselves to be our higher self. That is our true self. And when we can operate from there and bring in the love that our higher self is made of to transform our baser nature tied up with the ego, then we can achieve a greater degree of healing of this wound. The fact that it's like a hole in the ego creates an opening that the soul can operate through. But that doesn't mean we should glorify any suffering that we experience. Suffering is a necessary part of life to some extent, because suffering is tied to our ability to show compassion with others, because compassion is linked with our pain networks in our minds. So if we've experienced suffering ourselves, when we see someone else facing the same problem we've had, then it's far easier for us to feel empathy and compassion towards that person, because we've been through that suffering, but we've transformed it through love. So we don't resent our past, we don't resent our wounds. We realise that we've learned a lot about ourselves, we've developed wisdom and become a healing presence. Because it all boils down to the old phrase, hurt people, healed people, heal people. If we can do the alchemy inside ourselves to transform whatever pains of disconnection we felt into a connection with our higher selves and with divine flow, then we can then become a healing influence rather than a hurting influence. Chiron shows us where those wounds are within us. We may project it onto other people, but eventually the only way to transform is to look within, to face that core side of it and learn to show love to it, as painful and as unpleasant as it may feel. If we can love that part of ourselves, we can then heal it, transform it into goods, and we then become a presence that can heal people who are facing exactly the same issue that we've been through. Because this is the wisdom of Chiron. We take whatever wounds we faced in the past, we see the wisdom in it. We may not be able to completely heal ourselves, but by understanding that wound, especially with the Pisces being disconnection, we can then understand the difficulty of the people are facing, and instead of judging them out of discomfort, we extend compassion to them. Now that doesn't mean that we just blindly help everyone. Some people don't want to heal. There's a fundamental fact, and we have to accept that with people. If people are prepared to take the steps to heal, then by healing ourselves we can help those people, but we can't help everyone. Some people don't want to heal from their past because they've built their identity around it. and that is their choice. We may not agree with it, but we have to respect their free will, because that's what they've chosen to do with whatever pain they're feeling. And in those instances, we can send healing from afar, but there's no point trying to help change that person if they don't want to change. So for us personally, we need to look inwards, see what discomfort is arising where we felt disconnected from love in the past, and radiate that love to ourselves so that we can heal and transform that wound within. Because then we become a healing influence. We radiate empathy, love and compassion to other people without being drained. And if done healthily, we also don't feel any kind of saviour complex. We help the people who want help, but we respect the right for other people to stay in a wounded state if that is what they choose to do with their lives. It's not our place to rescue everyone. Everyone has to take responsibility for themselves. If we take responsibility for where we've allowed ourselves to feel disconnected in any way, and we reconnect with Source and use that loving energy to transform the wounds, then we can achieve a greater degree of healing than we've ever experienced in life so far. We can become a conduit for love and healing, and then we can transform that through acts of service. But it's only by taking responsibility for our own path of healing that we can achieve this and become the beacons of love, light and healing that so many people are talking about. But sometimes I wonder how many people truly understand what the meaning of that is. Because if we truly understand love, light and healing, then we take absolute responsibility for ourselves, our thoughts, our actions, our words and our beliefs. So during this transit, let's face whatever discomfort comes up rather than any habitual habit of trying to suppress it through escapist behaviour, and we can transform these wounds of disconnection so that we can become the love that the world needs right now. And we can become that transformation through healing ourselves, which opens a gateway to heal other people just by being present and radiating that energy from us. Even if no concrete action is taken to help that person, just being near us may well be enough for them if we've done the work to heal ourselves and radiate that healing to others. May Chiron bring you much wisdom about your own pain, and may it deepen your love, your empathy and your compassion, so that you become that beacon of healing that the world so desperately needs right now. May it bring many blessings. Take care.